Check these little creatures out. They're a roller rocker. They spin really freely. Scorpion brand. Yeah, no, they'll do the job. So I have to run these over to Pete. This is the second batch. They gave me the wrong sort because I've got Edelbrock heads. Got quite a large stud. These are stud mounted. But they're going off to Pete. I've just come out to the shed after making ZF38. I've done 2 of them, but these that's the hubcaps off the mags. And for an extra $20 they sold me these, well, there's sort of an epoxy or a plastic type sticker, so they say take the other one off. Just to loosen the double-sided tape. That's pretty good. I did have a blade here. Here we go. You just slide the blade down, separate the double-sided tape from the actual cap. Let's just get the worst of it off and then clean it off with a bit of thinner. So it's simply just a double-sided tape setup. I like to sort of spread my fingers like so it sort of centralizes it. That's how they came. That's how they are. Tell you, it's useful having that ZF sitting there as a donor, so I could just follow how this brake line attaches, because I've totally forgotten. It's 5 years, you know. There'll be a clip for that to hold that in. I'll have to go and find one. This would be it. It's the only clip in the bag. That's it. All right. Same story, I won't tighten this off until I get it all clipped up into position. You virtually got to push them in and clamp them. That worked. A couple in and then I'll tighten it up at the front. Barely reusable, I reckon. That's where you buy those spanners, so they don't do that. Yeah. Right, I'll go and clip the rest of this up. That's looking good. That's nice and tight, actually. Pretty good. I've been underneath the ZG donor car and I'm covered in shit and dust and goat's poo. I used to have goats and I used to lock them in that area. Going to go down into the car now and tighten off that rear joint where it meets the hose. One more thing I actually put in this morning was this aerial, because I just did a little bit of work in the underneath the dash, just tidying up some wires, and I'd actually trapped one of the vent cables under the driver's side with the brake pedal box, and so I had to free that up, and I rerouted the wires. There was wires running down the outside of that kicker panel, that internal kicker panel, and Pete just sort of slammed them in there just so we could test the system, but they really can't. Oh, you can't even see that. But they really can't be running on the outside of that kicker panel down there, because it's going to push the kicker panel out when I put that on. So all of the wires really need to go down through the torque box, I think it's called, up underneath the dash, go down through the top hole and run down through there. So that's I just spent a bit of time rerouting those. Yeah, but I also realised that I've probably bogged up or welded up the aerial hole under there. So the reason why I've sort of dummy fitted the aerial is so that I can make a passageway for that, to get that into the cab. These guards have to come off now for the to put the suspension on, but yeah, that's why I did it. So that's why the aerial's in. Ow, 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 ow. Blood, 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 ow. That fucking hurt. Ow. Right, I think we might have a little issue here with the brake line. The original factory one has 2 holes and they're evenly spaced between there and there, whereas these aftermarket ones have 1 hole and a locating clamp or a locating piece. Now that, I presume, sits in there, but what's happening is that elbow is too far forward, so it doesn't line up with the holes. If you can see that, I'll just get it in a better position for you. So that back hole's lined up. Okay, so that's where we are. So what I'm going to have to do is straighten that out and bend it back a little bit sooner. Yes, it does. Works perfectly. These ball joints came with 2 washers, these bottom ones. So I assume one goes on the bottom, one goes on the top. And this top ball joint came with no washers. By memory. I wouldn't have put 2 on that ball joint. I would have put whatever came with that ball joint on that ball joint. Anyways, so you let me know, people. I'd really appreciate that. If it passes a roadworthy, we know it's right. ratchet's lost its ratchet.
One eternity later.
Now, that bush isn't sitting in there flush. What I'm going to have to do is either jack that up, jack that whole bloody wheel up to get some extra purchase on that, but I can't do any more. It's as tight as it'll go, but the bush is still sitting away from the from its housing. So I'm tipping once I get it on its feet, I'll be able to tighten those two front ones up and get some more purchase on that. The mechanic's got to do a good check and sign off on it, and he's going to check all of the safety equipment, the suspension, the brakes, you know, he's going to check it all, and he'll sign off on it because he's done the roadworthy. Sure, I did the work, but he checked it and passed it. He's the expert. Interestingly, I'd lost that nut, castle nut, off this, whatever it's called, idler I think. Wasn't in any bags, but this was one off an XW that I, leftover parts that I sent off and got gold zinced. Exactly the same part as on the XWs. Something so small, but so satisfying to put on. So it turns out I've lost the, there's some sort of rubber bush there, and I've lost it. So that's really fortunate. There is a locator, there's a keyway. You can't get it in the wrong position. It just won't go on unless it's in exactly the right spline position. Just trying to make up a nolithane bush for my pitman arm. So I managed to scrounge that piece of nolithane from one of the rear spring bushes. Now I'm just going to round it off. I've drilled the hole through the centre, a little smaller, so it's going to fit quite snugly. And I'm just going to, hopefully I can grind that with the grinder and then polish it, because it seems to polish. So I want to make it look roadworthy. It's a long shot. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, they're only $55, but the places are closed today. Everything's closed because of that silly game. So as you can see, I've put a steel washer on each side, and I'm just going to try and grind it off, so once I hit the washer, I know that that's the size. It's getting there. Looks pretty good. So it wants to move. And the steering column's not wanting to turn. Oh, ignition. So I've just taken a little bit off the bottom, and I've also slightly cone shaped the hole. As that has slightly tapered that shaft. That bushwork's a treat. I just trim it down a little bit more and grease it right up. And we've got steering through the steering wheel. So I'm just pulling through some brake fluid in through the lines. So we top up the reservoir. So we've got brake fluid running down the booster there. Oh, that's painful. I didn't think I wasn't expecting this little problem. I'm going to have to do some YouTube. So I've just been down to buy a new master cylinder. The other one was clearly deteriorated and I'd lost the seal out of the back of it. Pretty sure it'll be sitting in the brake booster of the coupe. But even though it was brand new, it was 5 years old and had been sitting in one of my boxes for about 4.5 years. And then put on the coupe, and the coupe's brake system was pretty dodgy. So it got covered in oil, and I'm sure that the all the seals have shrunk and whatnot. And yeah, so if the seal falls out, I think it's all over for the rubber. So yeah, so just got a new one. Pretty certain it'll solve all of my problems. Have to excuse me working in no shirt, but it's hot here today. It's our first hot day of the year. It's almost 30 degrees. It's not even 12 o'clock. So I had this brake cable made up. It's got an XH tail, because that's the vehicle came off, and XA length, or actually ZF Fairlane length. So the hooks are all the correct length. That's good. Fits like a glove. Yeah, this handbrake was sort of plaguing me a little bit. I was quite worried about trying to butcher an XA one onto it. And retro spares, I can't remember where they are, what suburb they're in, but yeah, they were open this morning. I went up, they made it well awaited. But look guys, I'm really perplexed. This is a brand new master cylinder that I put on this morning, and it's brand spanker and it's leaking. I've got good pedal. I bled the system, but after pumping it, you can notice the dribble of death underneath there. So 2000 grit, I'm just going to clean this edge around here. It's a little bit rough, but if it's rough it could just be holding out just a fraction. So I'm going to use some wet and dry 2000, a little bit of WD-40 rather than water. Water creates rust. So it's 2000 grit, so it's not doing too much harm. It's just smoothing this edge off. There's a little bit of surface rust. I can see that it's discoloured the liquid. Righto, just to show you how easy it is to bleed your brakes by yourself using a vacuum pump. I'm going to be bleeding the rear driver's side brake. The rear reservoir is full. I've got brand new clean brake fluid there. Probably start by cleaning the grease nipple, the bleeding nipple off. Put your 10 mil over it. Now find out, okay, that's where you crack it. You crack it this way, and you don't want gravity to be closing this off. You just so I would probably sort of start there, and when I crack it up and over. Oops, that gets held on. So it's sort of sitting in that position, because to see if gravity wants to shut that off, you're sort of doing away with your bleeding with your flow. You're closing your flow down. So I'll probably start it there. And first thing to do, so this is just a pretty stock standard, very cheap vacuum pump with a reservoir on it. So I pop the hose, I put the spanner on, pop the hose on. And the first thing you want to do is build up some pressure. So we're at 0 there. So you want to, before you crack the line, because otherwise air could travel back up the line. So you build up the pressure. We're up to 10 psi. We'll probably go up to about 15 psi there. And now I'll crack the line, so we know that there's a vacuum in there already. And start pumping. And you keep as long as you keep the pressure up. See, nothing's flowing through yet, it's just air. But so as long as the vacuum pressure is there, there's no air going up into the line. Once it starts to run, you're going to start getting somewhere. But you can't go too long, because your reservoir is going to empty out, and then you're going to be sucking air again. Keeping an eye on that, looking at your reservoir size. Okay, I'm going to close it off now, and we've still got vacuum in there, which is good. Check the reservoir, and she's gone down significantly, but not empty, which is what we wanted. Top her up. And go again. So there's vacuum in there. There's a little button at the bottom which drops your pressure, which drops your vacuum, but you don't want to release that, release the bleeder nipple until there's a vacuum. Okay, so we've got a vacuum there. Safe to release that. And just keep the vacuum going. We're pulling through fluid now quite nicely. Got to keep an eye on that fluid though, because if that reservoir empties out, you've got to start the whole process again. Going to close her off with a vacuum still. You've got to maintain the vacuum. So just top the reservoir up again, build up the vacuum, and crack her again. Pretty easy. I keep pumping until I've turned that bleeder valve right off. Excuse the mess on the workbench. I sort of have big sessions where I just go for it and ignore cleanliness. And then once I start struggling to find tools, I stop. So what I'm doing, because I have a brake problem, can't afford going to buy this stuff every 5 minutes, and I'm just going to filter it with a paint filter, just to get any lumpy bits out, any bits of metal and stuff. And there's little particles, little bits of, you probably won't be able to see it, but if I put something white behind it, you might. So that's all the stuff Seeing that filter there? That's all the stuff that's flushed out of the system, like little bits of metal and gunky stuff. I'll just write on that, filtered. So it's good to go again. Just can't afford to, these things are bloody expensive. They're about 18 bucks each from the service station. I needed 2 litres, well I wanted 2 litres. And I'll flush that all through. Because I've had to bleed them a couple of times because I'm trying to trace a problem, I'm not going to keep buying brand new fluid when it hasn't even been heated yet, it hasn't even been used. So here's the result of all of that bleeding. A nice pedal. That's a great pedal. It's really hard to see in there, but there's no leak. Sanding that area out with 2000 wet and dry, cleaning it right out so it's nice and clean and shiny and smooth looking, reinstalling it neatly, cleanly, there's no leaks. Oh, God, I'm so happy. Right, it's one thing after another with this, because I don't really understand what I'm doing, I'm not a mechanic. Everything, I'm sort of ready to put the wheels on, finally. I've had to take the handbrake cable off. So all of the wheels spinning the brakes, I've got a great pedal, everything's working great, except this caliper's stuck on. After bleeding and doing all of that stuff, stuck, it won't even budge. So I'm going to have to take it apart and have a look, see what's going on. Righto, so we've had a problem with our rear right hand brake. I'm pretty certain I replaced all of these rubbers and whatnot, all the seals, about 5 years ago when Adam gave me this disc. Now, of course I didn't use it. Now I understand the principle of this, of the handbrake function. Okay, so when you pull the handbrake, it pulls the arm forward. Now that's got quite a chunky thread on it. It actually unscrews, technically, it unscrews the piston and forces the piston outwards. And the problem I was having was this, after I charged up the brakes and got them all nice and bled, this caliper was sort of stuck on. I just want to make sure I can get it all the way in. It looks like it's as far as it wants to go. So I would imagine, nah, that's it. Okay, so that's as far in as it wants to go. So we can unscrew that. And what I've done, I've cleaned everything up nicely. Everything's all nice and cleaned up. That's pretty cool. And that's right in, which is where we want it. It was sitting out, and of course, as soon as I charged the system up, it's beautiful. Now I know probably what's happened is yesterday, before I bled the brakes, I dicked around with a handbrake. And I think I pulled on this cable side, on this side of the cable, just to check it, see if it was doing its handbrakey thing. And I'd pumped the piston out via the handbrake. And I bled the brakes, got myself a nice big fat pedal. And with the handbrake on, with the handbrake off, nice. That's good. Don't need that anymore. End of an era, boys. End of an era. She's all freestanding now, guys. Pete's just been. So she's just sitting on pretty much her own weight. So that's the height it sits. Of course, it's sitting higher in the front because the engine's not in. It's nice to have it out on the rotisserie. So I made these blocks up. They're solid as. It'll never roll off those, never fall off those. So really productive weekend, really.